The stars looked like they were burning as Captain Elias Cade stood on the command bridge of the Terran warship Valkyrie. The space outside was filled with wreckage-shattered hulls of ships, drifting bodies, broken hopes. To be a peaceful mission had turned into a silent graveyard. The Siraxi Empire, known for their cold pride and strict traditions, had betrayed the peace talks. Without warning, their ships had opened fire during the gathering in Sector J-17, turning a diplomatic meeting into a slaughter. Human ships had no time to react. 32 vessels were destroyed within minutes. Among them was the Athena, a diplomatic science vessel, and the one that haunted Elias the most. It wasn't just another loss. The Athena carried Leia Zareth, a Siraxi defector who had once served as a royal guard for her empire, but had turned against them to help humanity. More than that, she had become someone special to Elias, someone who saw through the borders of species, who had learned to love. A human. He remembered her last moment aboard the Valkyrie before the mission, her silver eyes calm, her hand resting over his, and her voice full of emotion. "My heart is yours, Elias. When this war ends, I will ask you something that means everything." To me, then she was gone, on the Athena, flying straight into betrayal. As the image of the wrecked ship floated before him, a heavy silence filled the bridge. Commander Hale reported the full loss count, his voice hollow. Elias barely heard. Him. His mind was stuck on Leia. He had tried to keep hope, but with each passing second, it faded. Suddenly, a strange signal cut through the static. Cum's officer's voice jumped in surprise. "Captain, there's a distress signal weak, but it's real. It's coming from a Siraxi wreck." The screen flickered, and then it appeared blurry. Glitching but unmistakable. A face appeared. Blood on her forehead, fire behind her, but alive. "Leia, this is Leia Zareth, requesting emergency extraction. They turned on me. I have their plans. I'm not dead yet." The entire crew went silent. Elias didn't think. He acted. "Prepare a shuttle. I'm going in." Commander Hale tried to stop him, reminded him it was dangerous, but Elias had already made up his mind. He would not let her die out there. She wasn't just a Siraxi warrior, or an informant. She was someone who had chosen him despite everything. Elias geared up, took a small squad of Marines, and launched into the war-torn wreckage field. The drop pod flew fast, dodging metal fragments and the burnt remains of what used to be ships. Explosions still echoed in the distance as surviving. Siraxi patrols hunted anyone who had lived through the ambush. The wreck of the Athena loomed ahead like a broken beast. Fire crawled across its surface, and twisted beams jutted into space. As they landed, the soldiers quickly set up a defense line. Elias moved without fear, calling Leia's name into the cum. Her voice came back, weaker now. "Lower deck. Oxygen low. Siraxi search team near me." He ran through the broken halls past the floating bodies of former allies, heart pounding louder than the alarms. 2 Siraxi scouts spotted him, but he didn't stop. He shot them down and blasted open a sealed door. Inside, hidden behind fallen beams and a cracked energy field, was Leia. She looked pale, her armor damaged, blood across her face, but her eyes still burned with fire. They locked eyes. A moment of silence passed between them, pure and full of everything words couldn't say. "You came," she whispered. "Always," he said, and pulled her into his arms. They fought their way back through the wreckage, dodging plasma shots, carrying each other when needed. A blast hit Elias in the shoulder, but he didn't stop. They reached the shuttle, and his team got them out. Back on the Valkyrie, Leia handed Elias a small crystal drive. Her voice was firm now. "This holds the invasion data, the Siraxi plan. To destroy Earth, we have to stop them before they move." Elias looked at her, blood drying on her skin, the fire of war still in her eyes, and he knew 2 things. First, humanity had a chance now. Second, he would never let her go again. The shuttle shook as it flew through the wreckage field, dodging flaming metal and broken ship parts drifting in space like silent ghosts. Elias Cade stood near the hatch, his armor scratched and his face hard with focus. He held onto his side. Rail eyes fixed on the glowing shape ahead, the shattered remains of the Athena, where Leah Zareth had sent her desperate signal. Around him, his squad of Marines moved with quiet precision, weapons ready, their faces pale under helmet lights. They all knew the risk. Enemy patrols were still nearby, and the area was filled with unstable wrecks that could explode at any moment. But Elias didn't care about the danger. All he cared about was finding her. Leia wasn't just an ally. She wasn't just a Siraxi defector. She was someone who had once risked everything to stand with him. She had chosen a human's side over her own empire. And now she was trapped, alone, hunted by the very people she had once called her own. The shuttle made contact with a broken section of the Athena's hangar. Metal surface was scorched and cracked, with deep holes exposing the dark void beyond. As the hatch opened, Elias jumped out first, scanning the shadows with his rifle. "Leia, can you hear me?" called into his com. Static answered at first, then a soft voice, tired but still steady. "Elias, lower deck. I'm pinned. Oxygen is running low. Siraxi soldiers near me." That was all he needed to hear. He motioned to his team and led them deeper into the wreck. The inside of the Athena was a maze of fire, smoke, and ruined corridors. Gravity had failed, so they floated carefully through the debris. Bodies of human and alien crew drifted past. The sight made Ilias's jaw tighten, but he didn't stop. He kept pushing forward, driven by the sound of Leah's breathing over the cum. At one junction, Siraxi scouts opened fire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air. Elias rolled into cover and returned fire without hesitation. His team flanked the enemy, taking them down quickly. The fight lasted less than a minute, but it was enough to make him worry. The Siraxi knew someone had survived. Then they were trying to finish the job. "Move," he ordered. "She's close." They reached the lower deck and found a sealed blast door, half crushed by fallen beams. Behind it, faint life signs glowed on the scanner. Elias pushed forward, forcing the door open with a powered grip. Inside, smoke and sparks filled the small chamber. Wires hung from the ceiling like metal vines. And in the center, shielded behind a flickering energy field and a fallen support beam, was Leia. Her armor was cracked, one leg pinned, and her breathing mask was flickering. But when her eyes saw Elias, they lit up. "You came," she whispered, voice shaking with emotion. "I told you I would," Elias replied as he rushed to her. He lifted the beam with help from another soldier, then carefully pulled her into his arms. She winced in pain, but didn't complain. Her fingers gripped his armor tightly, as if making sure he was real. Elias looked into her eyes, saw the mixture of pain and hope, and felt something deep inside shift, something that reminded him why this fight mattered. "We're getting you out of here," he promised. They retraced their path, but the Siraxi were already closing in. Red warning lights lit up as the structure began to collapse. Explosions shook the deck. Elias handed Leah off to two Marines and covered the rear, shooting back at the advancing Siraxi. A plasma bolt struck his shoulder armor, burning through to skin, but he kept firing. His team pushed through the wreck, dodging fire and jumping across torn corridors. Waited outside the broken hull, its engines ready. One final leap, and they were inside. The shuttle rose fast, escaping just as the Athena's core exploded behind them in a silent burst of light. Inside the shuttle, Elias sat beside Leia, breathing hard, his shoulder bleeding. She leaned on him, her eyes fluttering closed, but her grip on his hand tight. She pulled a small metal crystal from her belt and handed it to him. "This has everything," she said softly. "Their invasion plan, locations, dates, fleets. We can stop them, but we have to act soon." Elias looked at the crystal, then at her. She was bruised, broken, nearly killed, but still thinking about saving others. Still thinking about Earth, about him. Nodded slowly, his voice steady. "We will. I swear it." And as the shuttle flew back toward the Valkyrie, leaving the graveyard of ships behind, Elias knew this was no longer just a war. It was personal. And with Leia alive in his arms, the real fight had just begun. Back on Earth, the mood inside the Galactic Council Hall was tense and cold. The room was massive, filled with ambassadors and leaders from dozens of species, all seated in a wide circle under the glow of floating lights.
Captain.
Elias Cade stood. At the center, his uniform torn from battle, his arm in a sling, but his voice was strong. Beside him stood Leah Zareth, dressed in dark Siraxi armor, her pale face calm but fierce. They had returned from the wreckage with something vital proof of a betrayal and the plans of a coming war. Leah handed the metal data crystal to the Council's lead technician, who connected it to the central projector. A large image floated in the air above them, showing fleet numbers, supply routes, secret Siraxi bases, and an exact date of invasion less than 3 weeks away. The room murmured in shock. Many had doubted Leah's loyalty. Others had not believed the Siraxi would ever break peace. Now the truth hung before them like a knife. Elias stepped forward and spoke firmly. He told them what had happened at Sector J-17, about the sudden attack, the destruction of 32 ships, and how the Siraxi Empire had targeted humanity first to strike fear in the galaxy. He explained how Leia had risked everything to escape with this knowledge, and how she had nearly died in the wreckage of the Athena. Then he paused, letting the room fall silent. "We don't ask for favors," he said, "but we ask for action. The Siraxi are coming. If we don't move first, Earth will burn." A few ambassadors nodded slowly, but many remained frozen. The Varnathi ambassador, a long-necked creature with shimmering scales, stood up and spoke. In a smooth voice, "Captain Cade, you bring serious accusations. War between the Siraxi and the Council will cost billions of lives. We must wait. We must negotiate." Elias felt his jaw tighten. They are not negotiating. They are preparing to conquer us. This is not theory. This is real. Another ambassador stood, this one from the Murden Alliance. "You speak of courage, Captain," he said. "But courage alone cannot hold back an empire. If we fight, we must be certain. We must have unity." Leah's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Unity means nothing if you wait until your cities are ashes. I was Siraxi, I know how they think. They won't stop at Earth. They want to rule it all. Believe humans are wild, dangerous, and better off erased." The silence grew heavier. The Council's head, an old human woman named Chancellor Yalara, looked at them both. Her voice was calm but tired. "We need time. We need votes. We need caution." That was the moment Elias knew the truth. They wouldn't act in time. I'm not. With politics, not with fear in their hearts. He turned to Leah, and their eyes met. No words were needed. They both knew what had to be done. Outside the hall, Elias called an emergency meeting with the Terran Defense Command. Humanity would not wait. If the Council would not stand with them, they would stand alone. Leah showed the defense leaders where the Siraxi hidden command base was located, a place near the red dwarf star Uthon 6, far from normal patrol routes. The base stored weapons, fuel, and hosted hundreds of ships preparing for the first wave of the invasion. If they could strike it hard and fast, they could delay or even break the Siraxi war plan. The Terran fleet was not the biggest, but it was smart, tough, and ready to fight. They had fought harder wars before. This time, they had Leah's knowledge, Elias's leadership, and one more thing: purpose. Every pilot, every soldier, every engineer understood what was at stake. This was no longer about orders, but it was about survival. Before the launch, Elias stood alone in the war room, looking out over Earth's blue sky from a high window. Entered quietly, her steps soft. She looked different. Now not just a warrior or a spy, but someone carrying the weight of 2 worlds. He turned to her and spoke gently. "You didn't have to come back. You could have run." She smiled faintly. "And leave you with all the glory?" They both laughed, but only for a moment. The laughter faded as the truth settled between them. War was coming. It was already here. Elias placed a hand over hers. "After this, if we make it back, I want to hear that question you were going to ask." Leah's eyes softened. "You will." Then she walked out with him, side by side, as the alarms rang and the fleet began to rise into the sky. Ships flew like silver arrows, leaving trails of fire behind. Above them, the stars waited. And somewhere near Uthon 6, death waited too. But Elias and Laia had made their choice. If no one else would stop the Siraxi, then humanity would. Together, the battle at Uthon 6 began with silence, followed by sudden chaos. The human fleet dropped out of warp space like a wave of fire and steel, led by the Valkyrie at the front. Elias Cade stood on the bridge, calm but sharp, his mind already locked into the rhythm of war. Laia stood beside him, her Siraxi eyes scanning the enemy formation as red warning lights blinked across the screens. The Siraxi base was bigger than expected. Hundreds of enemy ships rose from the hidden fortress that orbited the red dwarf star, forming a giant wall between the humans and the target. Their dark hulls reflected no light, giving them the look of silent, waiting monsters. Leah pointed 2 weak spots in their formation. They always guard the front and sides, but the upper rear's there. That's where the power relay stations are. Elias didn't hesitate. He turned to his fleet commanders and gave the order to strike. Human ships moved fast and with deadly skill, dodging enemy fire and weaving between defense towers that spat blue plasma. The stars became a field of light, a storm of color and destruction. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers as both sides clashed. The Nova Hammer rammed through 2 enemy frigates, while the Iron Rain laid down cover fire, its cannons glowing red-hot. Fighters danced between larger ships like wasps, dropping bombs on Siraxi hangars and engines. Leah's knowledge of Siraxi tactics helped the human fleet stay one step ahead. She spoke quickly, warning about cloaked mines, decoy drones, and energy traps hidden in the base. Elias trusted her completely. He moved the Valkyrie into the thick of battle, knowing that to win, they had to break the enemy's central power core at the heart of the entire station. That's their main relay. Powers their weapons grid, Laia said, pointing at a glowing structure deep within the base's center. Destroy it, and their whole defense net will collapse. The Valkyrie charged forward through a storm of fire. Enemy cruisers tried to block them, but the human ship fired everything it had: missiles, railguns, beam turrets. The hull shook with every hit taken, but Elias kept going. The bridge crew shouted warnings, alarms blared, but his eyes were locked on that target. The final approach was brutal. 3 Siraxi destroyers moved into their path. Leah gritted her teeth. We don't have time for this. Elias made a split-second decision and turned to his weapons officer. Fire the orbital lance. 1 shot. Full power. The orbital lance was the ship's most powerful weapon. A massive beam that took minutes to charge and seconds to empty a sun's worth of heat. They had one chance. The Valkyrie's lights dimmed as energy was pulled from every system. The ship slowed, drifting into the enemy's shadow, and then the beam fired. A white-hot stream of energy cut through the Siraxi line like a blade through ice. The destroyers exploded one after another, and behind them, the relay station cracked open like an egg. The explosions spread across the base, shutting down shields, weapons, and support grids. Suddenly, the Siraxi ships began to fall back, their coordination broken. The human fleet didn't let up. They pushed forward, striking at every weak spot. Explosions tore through the Siraxi command towers, and escape pods launched in all directions. The enemy's confidence broke. Many fled. A few chose to self-destruct. But victory was not yet complete. A huge shadow moved through the smoke, something darker, stronger, older. A Siraxi super-dreadnought, shaped like a black spear, emerged from behind the planet's rings. It was the personal flagship of High Warlord Exer, the man who had once commanded Laia, and who now wanted her dead. His ship was twice the size of the Valkyrie, armed with heavy plasma cannons and energy shields that flickered with ancient power. A message came through the comms. Exer's voice was low and cruel. "So you live, traitor. You gave your heart to a human. You will die with them." Leah stepped forward without fear. "I gave my heart to someone who believes in freedom. That's why you've already lost." But Exer didn't care for words. His ship opened fire, and the final battle began. The Valkyrie dodged and fired back, but the dreadnought was too strong. Leah knew they couldn't win a straight fight. So he and Leah came up with a plan. They would board the enemy ship directly. The small strike team, they flew into the storm, landed on the dreadnought's hull, and forced their way inside. Fighting through guards, they reached the command. chamber where Exer waited, wearing full battle armor, holding a glowing blade. The room smelled of smoke and fire. You could have ruled beside me, he told Leah. Instead, you chose a weaker species. No, she replied, drawing her own blade. I chose someone worth fighting for. Then the duel began. Leah and Exer clashed in a storm of light and steel. Elias joined in, blocking a deadly strike meant for her, his armor breaking under the blow. Bleeding, he still fought, refusing to fall. Leah cried out, her voice full of pain and rage. With one final strike, she drove her blade through Exer's chest. The warlord dropped to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief, then fell silent. Leah caught Elias as he stumbled, holding him close. It's over, she whispered. You saved us, he said weakly. But Leah shook her head. No, we saved each other. And outside, the enemy fleet fell apart. The battle for Euthan 6 was won. Humanity had turned the tide. The silence inside the Siraxi dreadnought felt heavier than space itself. After the fall of High Warlord Exer, the once proud flagship had turned quiet, its weapons offline, its soldiers either dead or fleeing. Smoke rose from the broken consoles, and the floor was marked with blood, both Siraxi and human. Leah stood still, holding her energy blade tightly, her breathing heavy, her body trembling, not with fear, but with the weight of what had just happened. Exer, her former commander, lay at her feet, defeated, unmoving. He had once been a symbol of Siraxi's strength, feared across dozens of systems, respected for his brutality and precision. Leah had trained under him, followed his orders, even admired him once. But in the end, he had become everything she had come to reject. His death wasn't just a victory for humanity. It was her final break from the Empire that had shaped her into a weapon. Behind her, Elias groaned in pain, leaning against a metal pillar. His armor burned and cracked from the fight. Blood stained his side, and his breathing was shallow, but he was alive. Leah rushed to him and dropped her blade.
Ow.
She tore open the chest plate of his suit and quickly applied a stabilizer. His eyes fluttered open, meeting hers. He gave a weak smile. Still standing? He asked. She gave a soft laugh and nodded. Barely. You took a blade from me. Couldn't let him hurt you, he whispered. You matter more than this war. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed the emotion. They had to move. More Siraxi soldiers might come, and this ship was still floating above the battlefield. She helped Elias to his feet, and together they moved back through the ruined halls of the dreadnought, their strike team guarding the path behind them. Every step was a reminder of what they had survived. Blaster marks lined the walls. Dead warriors lay across the corridors. Once these halls had echoed with Siraxi pride, now they were filled with silence and defeat. When they reached the docking bay, Leah turned back for a moment. She stared at the dreadnought, the place she had once called home. Her face was calm, but her heart was full of memories, some cruel, some proud, and a few too painful to name. Then she turned away. This was not her home anymore. Her home stood beside her, wounded but alive. Elias, the Valkyrie, welcomed them back like a warm breath in cold air. Medics rushed to take Elias to the infirmary. Elias stayed at his side the entire time, never letting go of his hand. Even when he passed out from exhaustion, she sat beside him, her mind racing with thoughts. They had won the battle, but at a cost. Dozens of human ships had been lost, hundreds of brave lives taken in the fire of war. But they had stopped the Siraxi invasion, broken the back of the enemy fleet, and slain the warlord who had planned it all. Leah felt both pride and sorrow. She had given up everything to protect a world that was not her own. And yet, for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. Days passed. Elias recovered slowly, each hour bringing back his strength. When he was finally able to walk, he met Leah on the ship's observation deck, where Earth's blue glow could be seen far in the distance. She turned when she heard his steps, and they stood in silence for a while, just watching the stars. It's beautiful, she said softly, so full of life. So are you, Elias replied. Saved us all, Leah. No, we saved each other. You believed in me when no one else did, even when I wasn't sure of myself. He reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, steady. You've earned your place here, With us. With me. She looked at him, eyes glowing faintly in the soft light. Do you remember what I told you before I left on the Athena? Of course, he said. He said when the war ended, you'd ask me something important. She stepped closer. Her voice was quiet, but every word struck deep into his heart. I came from a world where duty mattered more than love, where orders were law and weakness was punished. But then I met you, and I found something greater, Elias. Will you marry me? He stared at her, stunned for a moment, then smiled, soft and full of emotion. Yes, he said simply. Yes, I will. She reached into her armor and pulled out a small ring silver with a band of dark Siraxi metal, shaped like two stars crossing. She placed it in his hand and he slid it onto her finger. There were no loud cheers, no music, no crowd. Just two warriors under the stars, bound not by blood or empire, but by choice, love, and the fire they had both walked through. In that moment, the war felt distant, and what mattered most was not the battles they had fought, but the future they would now face together. The medical bay aboard the Valkyrie was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of machines and the steady beep of heart monitors. Elias lay on the recovery bed, bandages across his chest and arm, deep bruises hidden beneath the skin. Taken a beating during the final fight on the Siraxi dreadnought, but his spirit remained unbroken. Even now, with pain still pressing behind his eyes, all he could think about was Lio, how she had fought beside him, protected him, saved not just him but all of humanity. The door slid open, and she entered quietly. Her armor was gone, replaced by simple black clothes, her long hair tied back. She still moved like a warrior, strong and silent. But there was a softness in her steps now, something new in her eyes. She came to his bedside and sat down without a word, gently taking his hand. He opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "You're here," he whispered. "Always," she said. "Just like you were for me." They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment breathe. Outside, the ship moved slowly through space, heading back toward Earth. The battle at Othan 6 had changed everything. The Siraxi fleet had scattered after the death of High Warlord Exer. Without his leadership, their chain of command had crumbled. Dozens of captains surrendered. Others went into hiding. The core invasion plan had been broken. Humanity had survived, barely, but it had survived with honor. Word had spread quickly across the stars. Other races that once doubted humans now looked at them with respect, even admiration. Few expected the Terran fleet to defeat one of the galaxy's most powerful empires, and yet they had. Laia had become a symbol in that story. Siraxi, who had turned her back on cruelty and chosen a new path. Many on Earth had feared her at first, but those fears began to fade after her bravery at Uthan 6 was revealed. People saw her not as a traitor, but as a hero. But none of that mattered to Elias now. Right now, all that mattered was her hand in his, her voice like a steady drumbeat, keeping him grounded. He looked up at her with tired eyes. "You asked me to marry you," he said. "Did I dream that?" Laia gave a small smile. "You didn't dream it. I meant it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box made of polished black metal. She opened it to reveal a ring simple, beautiful, made of Siraxi, alloy wrapped around a Terran crystal. "I made it before the war began," she said quietly. "When I first realized I wanted to ask you, I didn't know if I'd survive long enough to give it to you." Elias stared at the ring, emotions building in his chest. "Why me?" he asked. "You're strong, powerful." The sky above Tirana's prime was painted in soft shades of orange and gold. The twin suns casting warm light over the open fields and silver towers of the human-colonized world. Birds flew in wide arcs across the sky, and the air was peaceful. A rare feeling after months of war. It was here, far from the ruins of space battles and the fire of dying stars, that Elias and Laia finally stood together, side by side, ready to begin a new life. The war was over. Not in every corner of the galaxy, but in the hearts of the people who had fought, bled, and survived. The Siraxi Empire, once feared and powerful, was now fractured. It's the death of High Warlord Exer and the destruction of their invasion plans. Their grip on nearby systems had loosened. Many Siraxi leaders stepped down. Others opened talks for peace. Some even offered to help rebuild what they had destroyed. It was the beginning of something new, something fragile but full of hope. On Earth and its colonies, there were still those who distrusted Laia, calling her a spy or a danger. But her actions during the war had changed many minds. She had risked her life not once but many times for humans, for peace, and most of all for Elias. Word of her courage had spread far and wide. Videos of her standing beside Elias during the final battle had reached every screen, every outpost, every ship. People began calling her the shield who chose love. Some still feared her, but most now looked at her with awe. The ceremony was small, held on a green hill beneath a tall tree. No grand palace, no glowing banners, just close friends, a few brave commanders, and members of both human and Siraxi communities. It was not a wedding of politics or power, but of heart. Laia wore a dress made of soft, dark cloth that flowed like shadow and light. A silver pin, shaped like a broken Siraxi blade, held her braid in place, a reminder of what she had walked away from and what she had chosen instead. Elias stood across from her, dressed in simple white, his wounds healed, his heart full. His eyes never left hers. Terran Elder read the vows, his voice calm, his words ancient. Elias held Leah's hand tightly and spoke from his heart. You came from a world of order and war. I came from a world that often feared the unknown. But somehow we found each other in the middle of chaos. I don't care where you were born. You're my home now. Leah's eyes glistened, but she stayed strong as she replied, her voice quiet and full of emotion. You gave me something no warlord, no empire ever could choice. You saw me not as a weapon, not as an alien, but as a person. I choose you, not because I left my people, but because with you, I became myself. Rings were exchanged hers. Forged from human silver, his from Siraxi steel. They didn't sparkle, but they were strong, made to last. As the suns moved behind the clouds and light softened across the land, they kissed. And the small crowd stood in quiet respect, some smiling, some wiping tears. No great fireworks lit the sky. No loud celebrations shook the world. But something powerful moved in that moment. A union not just of two people, but of two worlds. Once at war, now tied together through love. In the days that followed, Elias and Laia did not return to warships or politics. They chose to stay on Tyrannus Prime for a while, helping build homes for displaced families. Sharing stories with children, planting trees where bombs once fell. Peace was still new and unsure, but they believed in it. Sometimes at night, they would walk through the quiet fields, hand in hand, speaking softly about dreams and stars. One evening, as they watched the moons rise, Leah turned to Elias and said, I used to think love was weakness, something that made warriors soft. Elias smiled and replied, You still think that? She shook her head. No. Love made me stronger than I ever was. Strong enough to walk away. Strong enough to fight. Strong enough to live. He leaned in and kissed her forehead.
Yeah.
Then let's keep living, together.
Oh.
And under the stars. Two former warriors, once shaped by war and loss, stood quietly in the peace they had helped create. Their story, born in fire and shadow, had not ended in battle, but in a choice to love, a choice to build, a choice to hope. And in that choice, they had won a greater victory than any war could offer.